I want to thank and welcome all of you to be here tonight. This is a very historic event, the Day of Reparations to African People. Our first event, as Casey laid out, and it's really powerful to be here in St. Louis, here inside of Aquaba Hall, under the leadership of the African Revolution, the African working class, and the Black Power Blueprint. I want to start by saluting my leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I want all of you to know Chairman Omali Yeshitela and have the opportunity, which you will, to hear him speak tonight, and to know that, there are many people that look back in history and raise up great leaders from the past, and indeed they were profound leaders of the 1960s, and Marcus Garvey before that, Malcolm X, all of the leaders that paved the way for the African Revolution in the face of incredible attacks and defeat led by the United States government. But Chairman Omali Yeshitela is the leader for today. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has taken the African Revolution of the 1960s, summed it up as an incredible counterinsurgency, a war that crushed that movement, that assassinated the leaders of that time, that infiltrated the organizations, that imprisoned many, many activists and leaders of the African Revolution of that period, and then salted the earth, as the chairman has said, by destroying the economy that had existed, what little economy had existed inside of the African colony inside this country, and imposed deadly crack cocaine and drugs onto the African community and built a drug economy, as the chairman said, and then began systematically, state by state, building mass numbers of prisons and building the largest prison population on the planet Earth that is right here inside the United States. And so many African people are in prison in this country that 1 out of every 8 prisoners around the world is an African inside the U.S. And it was Chairman Omali Yeshitela who rebuilt the African Revolution, that built organization, that fought to keep the ideas of the right of African people to be free and liberated alive throughout this country and around this world in the face of all attacks, who for the last 50 years has struggled and brought about this day and has built an organization that today is in Africa, it is in the Caribbean, it is throughout the United States, and it is building rapidly in other parts of the world. So I salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, under whose leadership I have had the honor of working for 42 years. Chairman believed, when he founded the African People's Solidarity Committee in 1976, there was a few of us, white people, who came out then to that founding conference in St. Petersburg, Florida. The chairman believed that if you could understand this, that you can win other white people. And there's many white people who have come up to me after I have spoken, because our responsibility, of course, is to speak to other white people, to win them to the stand, that, to understand the leadership of the African working class and why we have to be on the forward side of history and what it is that we have to do by going back into the white communities to organize for reparations. And the chairman always believed that we could do this. And a lot of white people told me, oh, you'll never organize other white people. Oh, you can never do that with this message. But we proved them wrong, the chairman right. We have organization of African Solidarity Committee, Uhuru Solidarity Movement, not only here in St. Louis, but in Oakland, California, in Portland, in Seattle, in Brooklyn, and St. Petersburg, and Gainesville, Florida, and many, many other places, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago. Here, we are winning. We are able to be on the winning side, and it is a deep honor to know that this is a winning strategy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and I salute you, Chairman. I want to salute Deputy Chair Onasene Yeshitela, who leads the economic front, the economic and political front of the African People's Socialist Party and the African Revolution, who has made this Black Power blueprint a reality on the ground. The vision of the chairman, she has carried it out, and many of us in the African People's Solidarity Committee work directly under the leadership of Deputy Chair Onasene Yeshitela, and we know, as she shows, and the work of the African People's Socialist Party shows that there is no victory, there is no liberation of African people without the economic basis to self-government, to their own economy, to self-determination, that is essential to the struggle. And I salute the African People's Socialist Party. I salute the 7th Congress, which was an amazing event that just took place for over a week here in St. Louis, where African people and others came from around this country and around the world to lay out and adopt the plans for struggle for the next 5 years. And it was very, very powerful, an honor to be here. And this is, I just also want to salute KC for answering the call to come here and build in St. Louis, who just got out there and did it. And so many of you are here tonight because of the incredible work that she has done. I want to salute Casey's dad as well, who always comes to the days of reparations, Uhuru. And I want to salute Chair Jesse Neville, who is an amazing young comrade and leader of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru movement, who just did a brilliant job last year when, under the leadership of the chairman of the Uhuru movement, he ran for the mayor of St. Petersburg in a dual ticket with party member Akile Anai, who ran for city council. Jesse ran for mayor. On the slogan, unity through reparations, he kicked the ass of the ruling class of that city, and he also won so much in terms of opening the door and the understanding of so many mass white people out there in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida, to unite with this call for unity through reparations to the African community. So I want to salute Jesse. I want to Kitty Riley, who's a leading member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, working directly under Deputy Chair's leadership. Comrade Raya here, who has been in APSC for so many years, a powerful leader here. And all of you who are here tonight. I wanted to say that what we are talking about tonight, what our responsibility is as the African People's Solidarity Committee is to talk to you about, that I want to win you to, I want you to deepen your understanding of, that we have learned from Chairman Omali Yeshitela and from the party, that this is the most critical question in the world today. The most critical question is the question of the European assault on Africa, the enslavement of African people, the colonization of the majority of humanity, the genocide against the indigenous people. This is the question. Scratch the surface of any contradiction that you see in the world today, and this is at the bottom of it. Every war for the past 600 years has been about this, about what European country was going to control colonialism, was going to control the sale and trade of African people, who was going to control the colonial domination of the earth today. So regardless of our age, regardless of our social status, regardless of our gender, our sexuality, whatever issue, whatever place that we're coming from inside the white population, this is the question. This is the question that we have to look at, we have to understand, and we have to act upon today. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has shown, has proved, and points out constantly, and in his political reports, in his books, that there is a crisis of imperialism, that the world is in a crisis, the deepest crisis that it has ever known, that the gap, the struggle between the haves and the have-nots, between the oppressors and the oppressed, between the colonizer and the colonized, is deeper and more profound than it has ever been. That this system of imperialism is trying to take its last breath. It is in a severe crisis, and that this crisis has been brought about by the constant, unending resistance of African and oppressed peoples around the world who don't buy the lie, the myth of U.S. imperialism anymore, who are going to fight for their freedom, who are going to fight for their liberation and reparations and return of their land and resources. They're going to raise their children. They're going to have self-government. They're going to fight for a future in which all human beings can live, nobody at the expense of anybody else. Yeah. This is the world that we see today. So, we are here, and I believe that you are here because you want to take a stand, that you don't want to be part of the oppressor. You don't want to be part of imperialism and white power and parasitic capitalism. That you want to be part of the future, you want to do something. And we do have to do something. We can't just say, oh, can't we all get along now? Because we can't. We have to pay our reparations. We have to return the stolen resources. And we have to look at what it is that created this situation and how we got to be in the place we are. And how Africans who all around the world are oppressed, impoverished, and catching hell, whether on the continent of Africa, in Brazil, inside the United States, in the Caribbean, wherever, whether they're African people trying to get on those rickety boats and cross the Mediterranean and get to their stolen resources in Europe, where in fact something like 3,500 or more Africans have died just this year alone attempting to cross the Mediterranean to get there because Africa has been robbed of everything that it has. Wherever there are Africans, they are catching hell. And wherever there are white people, we are a small enclave surrounded by the oppressed on this earth. And we are the ones that control the resources, 80% of the world's resources. You know, there are those people who say, well, the problem is, oh, too many people on the planet. No, too many white people on the planet. We take the resources of 1 out of every 8 people. Yep. That's right. You know, in the world, that we do that. Without us, the world's going to be fine. Right. But we have a role to play. So the African People's Solidarity Committee was formed for a very strategic reason by Chairman Omali Shatel and the African People's Socialist Party, because it's part of the strategy that allows the African revolution to, as much as possible, win all the forces that it possibly can, including everybody from the white community, because African people are going to fight, and they're going to liberate Africa and every inch of it and all the stolen wealth. And that we have a role that we are able to go inside the belly of white power as an extension of the African Revolution in a way that African people can't. And it's our responsibility to do that, to go in there and win that. And that's what this is about. So this isn't like anything else that you've ever been exposed to. I want to say that from the African People's Solidarity Committee, that we say that the Day of Reparations to African people, first of all, is a tribute to African people. It's a very profound tribute to African people and the African working class, which has been designated as the most despised and hated group of people in the world by white power. And we know, when we look at the African People's Socialist Party, this is the African working class right here. tribute to African people who we kidnapped, we invaded, we stole their resources, we went into their lands, we went into Africa, we kidnapped African human beings by the hundreds of thousands and put them onto ships in a way that they couldn't even speak to each other because we made sure that their language wasn't the same, even though they had a sense of sameness and recognized they were part of the African nation. That we turned African human beings into commodities for sale, to commodities. This is what started and created the stock market of Amsterdam, the stock market of London, the stock market of New York, was the question of how much did an African person cost? What was the price of an African today? This is the basis for the system that we live in. We salute African people. We have our tribute because we turned African people into means of production, into machines, human machines, to work for free, for whom it took genius, it took brilliance just to survive every single day in the face of the terror that we also carried out. Yes, this ruling class did, but we united with it.
Yep.
We united with it. We stepped up on the backs of African people to get what is something for ourselves at the expense of them. We salute, we give our tribute to African people who we owe reparations to, that African people had the genius to invent and create the greatest productivity that ever existed on this planet just to survive. And now you have these books coming out where these white economists are saying that, you know how they teach us in history, in our history classes in school, that, oh, the American economy was so wonderful and so great, but it just had these bad parts. It had some slavery, it had some genocide, but that was a sideline thing.
Right.
And of course, that was the central thing. And now you have even white economists coming out and saying that the greatest productivity ever on the face of the earth was African people in the plantations of the United States who had to work at such a breakneck pace of productivity just to survive. Just to survive, beaten every single day they didn't make the quota of cotton that they were given. That this is what created the wealth of Europe, of white people ourselves. And we pay our tribute to African people whose bodies litter the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, whose bodies lay literally under the buildings, the high-rise buildings of Wall Street in New York, and over whom the lowliest white cracker, white person, had the power of life and death, and never paid a price for anything that we lynched, we burned, we raped, we tortured, and we paid no price. That's what we have to look at. And you know, I want you to stay with me because we aren't used to opening up about our true history. But we have been the subjects of history, so we could write our own lie, you know. Like I was in Tower Grove Park the other day, and you go in the entrance, and here's this enormous statue of Christopher Columbus.
Right.
And all these white men, slave owners, and pictures of them and plaques. You know, the narrative of the conqueror, the narrative of the colonizer. And we don't ever have to look at what it is, the fact that, yes, there is a state, there's a colonial state that carries out the violence against African and colonized people. But when the state's not around, we did it. We jumped in. We saw ourselves as the state. And that's why that this period is so critical. Because there is a choice that we can make, because there's tons of white people who are trying to keep the status quo. And then there's you. There's all the white people who say, hell no, I'm not going to be the oppressor for the world. I'm not going to have unity with this government anymore. Yeah. So we pay our tribute to African people. We salute African people because we know that they taught us what morality is. African people, and the struggle of African people was the moral compass of this world. Yes. It was an incredible struggle. And so that's part of why the US government's attack on the African Revolution is a slander that says African workers are the criminals. A million African workers, I mean, millions and millions, we are the criminals. Yep. We have to take responsibility for this and for what the government does in our name every single day. We are the subjects of history. And I want to say that African people taught us what true revolutionary morality is, what the world will look like. And African people taught us what love is. Yeah. And I say a tribute to people of my generation, and for many, many generations before this, that there are many of us who learned love not from our parents, but from African women who worked in our house, who, despite the fact that they were forced to leave their own children behind at home, taught us what it meant to experience love in this world, and in a way that we couldn't do that white people can't do that. And African people taught us what struggle is, they taught us how to fight, and they brought the vision of justice through everything that they have fought for. African people have taught us what real solidarity is. Yes. I have seen the African People's Socialist Party give its last dime to other colonized people who were struggling. Always on the front line for the Palestinian, the indigenous, the Mexican, the Nicaraguans, El Salvadorans, Cuba, Venezuela. African People's Socialist Party, first to be there, to embrace the struggle as one around the world. It's always us as white people who are like, well, oh, you're in solidarity with African people. Oh, what about the indigenous people? Well, what did you do about the indigenous people lately, by the way? African People's Socialist Party embraces all the struggle and sees it as their own struggle as well. So I salute all of you who are here in this city where Mike Brown was so brutally murdered, who was left to bleed out for 4 hours in the hot sun, but where there was an incredible resistance that sparked and galvanized the resistance of African people around this country and around the world, a resistance that got support and solidarity from the Palestinian people, from indigenous people, and from oppressed people around the world, that it leads to this day. Because Chairman Omali Yeshitela came to Ferguson right after the murder of Mike Brown. He went out on the street, he started speaking and talking, and he met President Kalambai of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, and he began organizing here. And this is what has come out of it, this incredible Black Power blueprint, led and put on the ground by Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela. African people, we know because we see this from the African People's Socialist Party, who sums up that African people are tired of just demonstrations and protests. To what end is the question? To what end? This is to what end? Yes. Not a struggle against racism. Not a struggle against racism. The African People's Socialist Party doesn't give a damn about racism. It wants political and economic control over the lives of African people. It wants its economy. It wants self-determination. and it wants its own state to make sure that no white person with horrible ideas in their head will ever hurt an African again. And I think that's right. The very first founding conference of the African People's Solidarity Committee, this is not about racism, this is about an anti-colonial struggle, just as the Vietnamese fought the U.S. for their land and for their liberation, just as the Africans on the continent fought for their land and their liberation, that this is about a worldwide struggle in which Africans are one people all around the world, colonized everywhere, an anti-colonial struggle, and that means of us that it's not about espousing some charity or some kind of thing that I am going to unlearn my racism over some weekend. Meanwhile, African people are catching hell every single day. That this is an anti-colonial struggle, that we have to go into the white population and win everyone that we can to stand on this side. And if you feel that you have to fight your racism, well, put that $600 that you were going to spend on that weekend Unlearning Racism workshop into Reparations for the Black Power Blueprint, and go in the white community and you're going to get over your racism because you're going to take a stand on the forward side of history, and it's very, very powerful to do that. So this is a struggle against parasitic capitalism. This is what the chairman has told us. It's not enough to say that it's a struggle against capitalism. It's a struggle against what the chairman has defined as parasitic capitalism, because capitalism was born on the assault on Africa. It was born on the genocide. It was born on the assault. It was born of imperialism, of Europe, leaving its borders, going out into the lands of others and conquering them. It is born of imperialism. So there's no time in history when capitalism was benign. It isn't something that started out well and went bad. You know, you can ask about George Washington owned 300 African people. Thomas Jefferson owned African people. Andrew Jackson, Indian killer and perpetrator of genocide. This is what this system is built on. This is capitalism. This is the system that all of our ATM cards are connected to, that all of our future, every dream and aspiration comes from this. And we wonder why are white people in these deaths of despair? Because as long as we are tied to a system that is built on murder and genocide and war and drone strikes and murdering young teenage African people and putting Africans in prison in mass, if we're tied to that system, of course it short circuits your brain. If you believe in justice, then we can't tolerate this. It has to go. It has to go. And white people are dying at such record numbers that they're getting worried about this. Actually, the life expectancy that once was 7 years greater than African people now is only a few years greater than African people. You know, that they can't figure this out because white people are in despair in this system now. Alcoholism, drug addiction, and suicide, and every other kind of thing that white people do is not a healthy, this isn't, some great civilization that we're living in. This is very sick because it is built at the expense of the planet Earth. And so we have to take up action. We have to take up action. White people are not going to lead out of this struggle. The future of this planet is in the hands of the African working class. Africa will be liberated. Africa's resources will be returned to it. African people will be free. and all of the oppressed and colonized peoples on the planet Earth will be free and liberated. This is the future of the planet, or there is no future for this planet. And so I'm calling on everybody here to join the forward side of history. Open up to what is the future, what is the reality that we face. Where can we play a role that is in solidarity with African people on the planet and everybody else on this planet? We can do it under the leadership of the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party, the Black Power Blueprint. We can go into the white community, unleash those stolen resources, turn them back over, end the parasitic pull of this capitalist system, and stand on the forward side of history. Unity through revolution!